This is Inside the Apple Studio, the podcast that details the intersection of architecture and Apple and explores how architects and other design professionals use Apple products in the practice of architecture. With your host, architect Neil Pan. Support for Inside the Apple Studio comes from Monograph. Monograph is the cloud-based practice operations solution built for architects by architects. Learn how Monograph can help you be more productive at monograph.com. Welcome to Inside the Apple Studio. I'm happy to have someone who is currently working towards obtaining an architectural license, but has been designing and practicing as a qualified design draftsperson for several years. He also has more than a passing interest in astronomy, even hosting his own podcast on the subject. I'm pleased to welcome Mark Iscaro to the show. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm excited to have you here. So let's dive right in with our first question for you. And it's kind of a larger kind of general question, but what inspired you to want to become an architect?
Okay, so when I was younger, I would have been about 7 or 8 years old, I used to sit out the front of my house with a sketchbook and draw the houses in the street. And I just always liked drawing houses for some reason. I don't know where it came from. My mother's a very creative person. She is a very good artist, very good poet. She won't say she is, but she's very good at it. And I think maybe I got that from her. But I used to sit outside and just draw the streets, draw the houses, and then I would nag her to take me to, and I'm assuming in America you have display homes where you have a street of 6 or 7 houses from a building company that you can walk through to see if you like the floor plans. And so I would nag her to take me through those, and we would go and walk through those, and I would take the floor plans that they had and take them home and design my own houses for fun. And I got it in my head that there was only 3 things in life that I wanted to be. One was an astronaut, one was an architect, and the other one was an archaeologist. I don't know why they all started with A, but they did. And the only one that I felt, the one that I really felt drawn towards was architecture. So from a young age, I was always drawing. In high school, when we had graphic design, I would design a series of house plans. So I would design one floor plan and variations of it and different facades, and they were my submissions for school for projects. So that's sort of where my desire or passion to become an architect came from. Just has always sort of been there. I've always just felt that that's the one job that I really wanted to always do, and I've done everything I can to get into that field.
As part of that, as listeners can likely tell from your accent, you're from Australia. Now, I wanted to ask you about a system that is there where you can become a qualified architectural design / draftsperson that is there in Australia. Can you explain a little bit about what that is and what it takes to obtain such a qualification?
Yeah, so I was a bit of a rebel when I was a teenager. So every time my parents said, you've got to do your homework, you've got to do this, I would rebel against that, and I didn't really do it properly. So I didn't do high school. We call it high school. So we don't have, what do you guys have? You have 2 different forms of high school, I believe.
Just the 4-year 9 through 12 grade, but earlier you have the middle school, which is a few grades before that.
Middle school, yeah. So we don't have middle school. So we have, you finish, you go from year 7, so all of our middle school through to high school is all in the same school. It's all the same thing.
Okay, sure.
And I sort of was a bit rebellious, and therefore I didn't really do my homework properly, and I didn't get the grades that I needed to get into architecture. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, well, how else can I go about doing this? Because I want to be an architect and I want to be in this industry. And then I came across this course at what we call TAFE, which is like a step below below university. Mm-hmm. And it was an associate diploma of associate diploma of architectural design and drafting. So I started studying that. And then at the same time, I went and got a full-time job as a steel structural detailer for an engineering firm. So I started to learn about steel design, structural design, and what architects were trying to push while I was studying architectural design and drafting at TAFE. And then when you finish that TAFE course, it's only a 2-year TAFE course. And then you can do an extra year, which I did to sort of give you sort of more commercial qualifications. And then you have to sit tests like you do as an architect. So I had to study, sit tests and pass tests. And I have to, every year I pay my public liability and professional indemnity insurance. And I have to be registered with what we call the Building Practitioners Board over here. And if I let my license expire, then I have to go and sit all the tests again. But basically, it's almost like a miniature version of a qualified architect. So I can do almost everything that an architect can do. I can't tender for government contracts, and I can't design structures. It may have changed. I probably should check on this, but last I checked, I can't design structures over 10 stories high.
Wow.
But everything else I can do. So I can do normal apartment complexes with basements. I've got one of those that I'm working on at the moment. I can do aged care facilities, which I've got one that I'm working on at the moment. I can design new homes. I can do townhouse developments, renovations, extensions. I've got my own registration number. So I can sign off on those drawings to go to building surveyors for building permits for builders to build from. And I do all of the construction drawings as well. So I've got to work out how the buildings are going to be built, and I have to sign off on them. And if something's not done right, it's like the architect is the person to blame. I'm the person to blame.
Right.
It's a little bit different, but you can go to uni as well, and architects get paid a lot more over here than building designers.
Oh, so that's probably one key difference. It sounds I mean, you can do quite a lot.
Yeah.
You're not very limited on the project types, but it sounds like the pay is probably the biggest difference.
Yes. Yeah. For some people, that's important. For people like me, I'm not too fussed. As long as I can make a living, I'm happy. I'm not here to be the richest architect or building designer going around. I just enjoy doing what I do, and want to have a job that allows me the flexibility to do the other things that are important to me as well.
So similar to the United States and Canada, and I assume other countries as well, a bachelor or a master's degree in architecture from an accredited university is required to be eligible to test for a license. Now, you're currently studying architecture at the university in Perth.
Yes. Yeah.
Since you can do all of the things you can do, why are you trying to get a degree now? Or what you're thinking about getting that degree now?
I get asked that question a lot, actually. Why would you go back to school? It's not for any other purpose than a personal goal. As I said to you, when I was younger, I wanted to be an architect. It was one thing I wanted to do. And then I stuffed that process up myself through being a ratbag rebellious teen. And I'm doing it purely and simply because I want to be an architect. I know I'm probably, without blowing my own trumpet, I can design and document as good, if not better, than quite a lot of architects that are actually qualified. And I could have got exemptions from half the course, but I chose not to. I chose to start it from first year and do all of the very basic stuff that everyone else has to do. So, because I wanted to do it properly, I wanted to get to the end of the course and come out at the end and go, okay, I am now a qualified architect. It won't change the way I do my work. It won't change the way I charge. It won't change anything really, other than I'll finally have achieved one of the goals I had from when I was about 8 years old.
Well, it's a very personal goal. It sounds very much like something that you should and need to do.
Yeah, it's pretty much it. It's just I'm not doing it for anybody else but myself.
Well, and that's the most important thing. So where are you at in the process currently?
I'm just about to finish my third year. So I've got 1.5 years worth of classes left to go, which will take me probably about 2.5 to 3 years to actually do, because you cannot working full time with all the other pastimes that I have as well. I can't do the number of classes that full-time uni students can do. I'll do one class or two classes a semester, not 3 or 4. So it takes a little bit longer to get done. So probably in about 2 to 3 years, I should have it finished up.
Now you're attending university currently online. Is that due to the pandemic?
Yes. No. Yes and no. Yes, it is due to the pandemic because you can't go to classes in person, but no, because Perth is, wow, it would be 4,500 or 4,000 kilometers away from where I am.
Okay.
So I'm on the east coast of Australia, and Perth is on the west coast of Australia. So it would take, 4 days to drive there. So, and I did toy with the idea of going back to university on campus, but the only place in Melbourne that I could, or in Victoria that I could get on campus was down in a place called Geelong, which is about an hour and a half's drive away.
Mm.
I toyed with that many years ago, but it would have meant uprooting my life and moving down there, which was just something I wasn't prepared to do. So I sort of sat back, and then this opportunity at Perth came up to do a university course online. It was the first online architecture course in Australia. And I think it was only a year and a half ago it got fully accredited. So it is a fully accredited university course. So anyone who finishes it will come out at the end as an architect. And it just made it easier. It meant that I could work full time still, study, and still see my family.
What's it like studying architecture online?
Very different to what I thought it would be like. It's very hard to build models from scratch and then have to photograph them to submit them instead of taking them into class. So when I did the TAFE course, we still had to do models and things like that, and you would do them in class, obviously, and the teacher would or the lecturer would look at them and work with you through on the issues. But these days, it's literally you're in a Microsoft Teams or a Zoom or whatever it might be. Everyone's in there talking and trying to present their vision on a screen. So it's very different from that point of view. The very first class we did they actually got us in first year to they set up a Minecraft world for all of the students to go in and build things. Which is,
Really?
yeah, I thought it was quite surprising. I actually had to get my son to show me how to use Minecraft when I first started. So I thought it was a very unique way of introducing people to the world of architecture. And now my daughter will design buildings in Minecraft and ask me if she would get a building permit for them based on how she's drawn them or built them in Minecraft. So yeah, very different, very different.
They might be great design projects, but the waterproofing might be an issue with Minecraft.
Yes.
So you said you were using Zoom or some other sort of online visual tool to present. Is that like you share your screen and you just have to show photos of your project and then talk about them and then
Pretty much, yeah.
yeah.
Yep, yep. And as the years have gone on studying it, they've shifted away from physical models and starting to push into 3D modeling and things like that. So it becomes a lot easier because you can start to pan around or create fly-throughs and whatnot as you're trying to show people what you do. But it's showing teachers and explaining to teachers on paper and on a live video what your vision is very difficult. But I suppose the pandemic has helped because in Melbourne we're still in lockdown, which means all of my client meetings for my actual work are all online anyway. So the last year and a half has probably helped a lot from a study point of view to learn how to present ideas and concepts to clients when you're not sitting face to face with them and you can physically show them. I've always found in-person meetings or in-person classes, it's easier when you're sitting across from the person to get your idea across. So the last year and a half, or nearly a year and a half now, I've learnt from a school point of view to transpose that into my work of how to get my ideas across visually on a computer screen. So it's been good from that point of view as well.
Now, are you taking some additional classes like a regular university schedule as well, or are you just able to focus on the architecture curriculum?
I had to choose one class that wasn't related to architecture. I chose a business administration class to do, mainly because as good as I am at designing things and as creative as I am, I suck at business management. I'm not good at that. That's not a good thing to not be good at when you run your own business.
Well, that seems to be something very common with a lot of architects. So you're really getting a chance to take advantage of the fact that you're back in school while you're running your own business and have the advantage of taking additional business classes.
Yeah, it's taught me to work smarter, not harder. That's for sure.
While you're doing the university and running your own business, how are you managing the work-life balance and all of that?
Um, Throw remote learning in there because my wife works full time. So she's going in because she's in the health industry, and health is an essential service. So while we're in lockdown, not only am I doing that, I'm also doing remote learning for my two children. My 14-year-old's okay; he gets up and goes to online classes, but my daughter's 8, so she requires me to sit with her and teach her. So it's difficult. So my morning, so from 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock when it's in school, it's working with Sadie doing her schoolwork. From midday till about 5 or 6 is client work. So really, I get 6 hours a day to try and get everything done. So it's all about being as efficient as I can. Dinner after that. When I have a class, I don't have any classes at the moment. They start again in about 2 weeks' time. It'll be sort of 9 o'clock till 1 or 2 in the morning working on university stuff. And somewhere in amongst all of that, doing the astronomy stuff that I do and doing the podcasting and hiking as well when we're allowed to get out again. Yeah, it's just all about being as efficient as I can. And I've become so much more efficient over the last 12 months.
What are the kind of things are you doing to be more efficient?
Streamlining design processes, streamlining. So I was very lazy in the world of detailing, as in CAD document blocks for details. So I would draw every detail from scratch in every project because they're all unique projects. Whereas now I've come to realize, well, yeah, they're all unique projects, but I have my style is the same essentially through every project. And even though the details may be slightly different, why am I drawing them from scratch every single time? That's just silly. So now I will drag a detail from another project or from a block, bring it in, and just adjust it to suit the project I'm working on. And it saves so much time. It's one of those things that you get so engrossed in just doing your work that you forget that there's a much more efficient way to do it that you should have been doing for years but haven't because you didn't need to manage it. I didn't need to manage my time before the pandemic. I'd go to work and I'd work from home all day and I'd work at night if I needed to. Whereas now it's like, well, I only have this amount of time. What can I do that's going to be much more efficient to get things done? Also working differently with councils, local councils. So previously you would come up with a design, the client would say, yes, let's go to planning. You'd do all of the drawings, the planning drawings, the reports, and you'd submit it. And then you'd spend months arguing with council. And now what I've started to do is do what we call a site yield diagram. So it's basically, here's roughly where the building's going to go. Here's some setbacks, send it into council and say, what do you think? Are we on the right track? They give us the feedback, say, change this, change that. We're happy with this, we're happy with that, which means when we get to council for a proper planning application, we're not arguing over silly little things and wasting time in meetings. And that's the other one as well. Meetings, I have less meetings now, a lot less meetings than I used to have. A lot of these done via email now. I used to have builders and developers want to have meetings all the time about the simplest things that you didn't really need a meeting for. Or the builder would say, I need you out on site to clarify this question. And COVID has helped in that way that builders have learnt to FaceTime and show me what the issue is so we can resolve it on the spot while I'm still in the office. I don't have to go out to site. We can work out a solution that way. And, some sites might be 40 minutes away. So it's 40 minutes out there. It's at least sometimes an hour on site because you end up talking about things that you don't need to talk about. And then 40 minutes back and there's nearly 3 hours of a day gone.
Right.
So there's the sort of things that I've been doing to streamline my time.
So after you obtain your degree in the next 2 to 3 years, what's the next steps in Australia to getting a license to practice architecture?
You have to do a certain amount of time working underneath a registered architect. Can't remember exactly how long it is. I think it's 2 years worth. I won't have to do that. I've already spoken to the Australian Institute of Architects and to the building practitioners boards and things like that. And I can be exempt from that because I've been practicing as a building designer for over 20 years now. So that I don't have to do, but I will have to study and sit exams before I can become fully registered. So that'll probably add another 6 to 12 months on. to do.
Now, how many exams are there in Australia?
Honestly, I haven't really looked.
That's a bridge you'll cross when you
It's
get
the
there.
bridge. Yeah, it is. It is. I'm not actually sure. I sort of that one. I'm leaving because I don't know when I'm going to get there, and it could be different in 2 years' time when I do actually get there than what it is now. I don't want to stress myself over something that might not be the same when I get there.
So you own your own business and that's the Madden Building Group.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so and from our previous conversation, it sounds like you're the only one and you do everything.
It's just me. Yeah, me, myself, and I. So I design, document, plan the works, do all the reports, organize all the external consultants, specify the projects for my clients. So
That's a big job.
it is a big job. Yes, it's there's a lot in it. That's what I was saying. It's all. I've pushed myself down the path of templates, template driven. So which I never used to do. I would just do a project by itself and work one project to the next project and then start everything from scratch again, which is a really silly way of working. It was very inefficient. The last 2 years has just been all about making myself as efficient as I can. So,
So looking at your work, I describe it just very plainly as clean and modern.
yep,
It's beautiful work. What architects are you influenced by, and what's your favorite style of architecture? How would you describe it?
that's easy. Mid-century architecture is by far my favourite style. Um, there's a local architect in Melbourne who was around in the 60s and 70s called Guildford Bell. He designed some beautiful streamlined sort of buildings in the Bayside area where I live. So his work has been very influential to me. Richard Neutra as well. I love Richard Neutra's work. Pierre Koenig as well. Um, Not so much this. I mean, the Style House is beautiful, but I like some of his other work that he did as well. His own house, for instance, with quite a nice structure. Everyone loves Frank Lloyd Wright. Um, Very good architect, but those are the sort of guys. So mainly sort of the mid-century guys. Probably mostly Neutra and Guildford Bell would be the two biggest influences on me architecturally.
Do your clients come to you for that style now that you've been practicing for a while and you've got some projects that are all built that exude that? Do they come to you for that style, or do they come to you and you've got to convince them to move in that direction?
No, they come to me for that style, so I don't advertise at all. I don't do any marketing or promotions whatsoever, and I've been doing it so long now that I have developers that specifically want that style, and clients see their work and want me to design in that style as well. So yeah, I guess I've made a bit of a name locally for that particular style of architecture,
Mm-hmm.
which is a nice thing to know, that people can drive past and go, "Oh, that's one of Mark's buildings."
Well, that's nice that you don't have to advertise, and that your buildings do the advertising for you.
Yeah, that's one thing I always wanted when I started my business, was to not have to stress about where the work's coming from. For instance, at the moment I'm working with one developer in particular who we've signed an agreement that he will pass through to me 15 projects a year.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's most of my work for the year sewn up, and then everything else on top of that is an added bonus. So
Wow.
yeah, but it's more about knowing the right people over here, I think, than it is about marketing. It's a very different world to America from an architectural point of view. Um, I see a lot online, from the forums that are about on Facebook in America in particular, where people are constantly contacted by people who want, or architects are contacted by people who want plans redrawn and things like that. I see that a lot. That doesn't happen. I've never had that happen to me. I've never had someone come to me and say, "Can you redraw my plans?"
Is that right?
Um, yeah, never. Not in 20 years has anyone come to me and asked me to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Everyone wants over here, they go, "Okay, I want to hire a designer or an architect to design something for me." Um, it's a little bit, I don't know whether it's the same for everybody here, but that's how it's been for me. Um, Everyone who's come to me for a design has come to me because someone has told them to come and talk to me about getting a project done.
So I wanted to next move to your passing interest, as I mentioned earlier, in astronomy. And I mentioned you created a podcast. What
Yeah.
got you first interested in astronomy?
Um, my son.
Is that
No,
right?
yeah. So everyone thinks that I got him into astronomy, but it's actually the other way around. Um, when he was about, so my son's a bit of an extraordinary young man. Um, a little bit of his journey. So Blake has autism. He's high functioning, so he's a very smart kid. He's just not very good at making friends. And but he started showing a very, very keen interest in astronomy when he was about 8 years old, to the point that it was almost, well, it's an obsession. And we bought him a telescope, and he loved it. And so we joined him up to the Astronomical Society of Victoria. He went along to juniors. So the first time he went to juniors, he sat on my lap facing me, didn't want to listen, didn't, because he was just all these new people. He's like, this is too much. A year later, he was presenting talks on astronomy to the entire society at the monthly meetings. And since then, he's gone on to have his own website, his own Facebook page, and he does work in the field of spectroscopy. So he takes visual spectrum of stars and works out chemical compositions using programs. And his current project that he's trying to work on but can't get the right equipment yet is to do a visual spectrum of galaxies so he can work out its rotational velocity, so how fast it's spinning. And he's 14 years old. Um, and in the last 4 years, he's been lucky enough to, I don't know if you know, everyone will remember the Apollo 11 mission, the lunar lander landing on the
Sure.
moon. Some of those signals came from Parkes Radio Observatory in New South Wales. It's a massive dish, big dish. Blake's actually controlled that. He's worked with some astrophysics departments at two different universities, hunting for things called fast radio bursts, so helping them sift through data. So that's where my passion for astronomy came from him. So he
He's
got
rubbed
into it.
off on you.
He's rubbed off on me, and now I'm the vice president of the Astronomical Society of Victoria. I help uh, coordinate, create, and run all of their events, whether they're in person or online. At the moment, they're all online, so I host all of the live streams, um, and I just love sharing astronomy with everyone, just to see how my son grew because of his passion for astronomy, and the fact that people gave him a chance and helped him. Now I want to do the same thing for others. So it has been a big push for turning our site, which is no one else can see it. You can see it. The image behind my screen is the site that we go to for astronomy. It's unsafe for disabled people. So if you're in a wheelchair, if you've got mobility issues, you can't go to that site because there's no paths. So one of the projects I've been working on with them for the last 2 years is putting wheelchair accessible pathways around the site, and we're also building a wheelchair accessible telescope which changes height. With the eyepiece is static, but depending upon the height of the wheelchair, you can adjust the eyepiece to suit, and you don't have to climb up a ladder to look through the telescope, which with big scopes you do. So all these are all things that I'm using my skills in design and documentation to bring to the astronomy club. And yeah, we're doing fundraising for it. I think we've raised, my wife and I have raised, with the help of others in the club, about $25,000 for it, for all this stuff, through all of the live streams we've done, raffles and all sorts of things. So it's a big part of my world when I'm not working, and it's fun. It's very enjoyable. I love doing the live streams. I love doing the in-person hosting. I have said to all of the guys in the club, look, I enjoy the hosting, but I'm not the smart person, so I need you guys to work with me, and I'll host, and you guys can tell everybody about all the amazing facts about what we're looking at, and it works well. I think one of our largest streams had 70,000 people watching, which was quite amazing.
Wow, that's incredible. Congratulations. So all of that, and then you decide to do a podcast about it as well. Tell me a little bit more about the podcast.
Well, that one came about because of lockdown. You
Uh-huh.
can't go anywhere, can't do anything. And I don't like sitting still. I have ADHD, so I've got to be active. I can't sit in one spot. I get very bored, and I become angry, and it's not good for anybody. So I need to occupy myself, which is why I have so many things on, why I do so many things. And recently, I actually had a sleep test, and the doctors were shocked that I got all of my sleep done in 3 hours. That's it. So like 3 or 4 hours sleep, that's it. That's all I need. It was quite surprising. And so I've got all this awake time. I don't go to bed until after 2 in the morning, and I'm up at 7:30. I'm awake. And I've got all this time to use. I'm like, what am I going to do? I can't go anywhere. I can't even go hiking. And I just started corresponding with an astrophysicist to try and get her to become um, the ambassador for our society, for our astronomy club. Being on the committee and vice president, I was like, okay, I need to do something good other than the other stuff I'm doing. We need to promote women in STEM. So we need a female ambassador. So I just started talking to this astrophysicist that I had some passing conversations with some time back, and convinced her to come on board as our female ambassador to promote women in STEM. From that, we managed to get every speaker from July this year to the end of the year to be female speakers for our monthly talks. And then the discussion sort of veered towards live streaming and coming on live streams with us. So she started coming on live streams, and then all of a sudden we just started joking about this idea. What if we did a podcast? And we're kind of like, I did a show back in 2012 called Craft Beer Crusaders. It's a TV show on local TV about craft beer, which is another passion. And the way I looked at doing that was you need one really smart person and you need one goofy, buffoon, foolish, not so, I won't say not so smart, but someone who doesn't understand everything there is about the topic that you're discussing, who just enjoys it. And they play off those sort of characters play off each other well. So she's the astrophysicist, and I'm just what we call the drunk astronomer. I'm just the guy who sits in the backyard and has a beer and looks up at the sky and takes photos of it with his phone. And it works well. We play off each other very well, and we just decided, well, let's give it a go. And our first podcast released about 2 weeks ago after months of working out how we were going to do it and then recording it. And it's not a lot of listens, but we're excited that we've had 80 people listen to it. We think that's pretty cool for a
That's
first
great.
episode.
Yeah,
and the second
absolutely.
one dropped last night, and we've had a dozen people already listen to that one. So it's all fun. We don't take it too seriously. There's a lot of bad dad jokes and in there, and a lot of lighthearted humor, but a lot of information. We have a section in there called "Shit You Should Know." So it's just about the very basic things in astronomy that everybody should just know, but we don't because we don't bother thinking about it. So yeah.
I'll make sure there's a link in the show notes to the podcast as well. Or if people are looking for it, they can find it there.
It's a pretty cool name. It's what is it? It's spaghettification, stretching your understanding of the universe, because you get past the point of event horizon near a black hole and you go into the black hole and you get what they call spaghettified. You get stretched to the point where you get so close to the black hole that you'll be able to see the back of your own head because you've been stretched around it. So we thought we'll play off that. We'll go spaghettification, stretching your understanding of the universe. So that's a bit of a fun name. So
I love it. That's so creative. Hey, let's take a quick short break. And after, we're going to explore a little bit more about your experience with the Mac and other Apple products right after this. How do you manage your firm? Are you using dated and clunky software? Are you frustrated using spreadsheets and never really getting a clear view of the status of your projects? Then I'm happy you're listening, because Inside the Apple Studio sponsor Monograph can help. Designed by architects for architects, Monograph allows you to track your time, your projects, and your budgets, and you can do it all in real time. They have a feature called Money Gantt, and with this awesome tool, you can immediately see whether you are under or over budget on a project. along with their new tool, Resource, which allows you to reallocate your team's time and track its impact on your remaining budget. You can easily adjust your projects on a week-to-week basis. Monograph makes this easy. So help support Inside the Apple Studio by checking out Monograph at monograph.com. Be proactive with Monograph. Welcome back, Mark. Now, you've shared quite an interesting journey of becoming a licensed architect that you're currently on. Now, let's discuss a little bit about how you started using a Mac and other Apple products. How were you first exposed to the Mac? And what was your first Mac that you used or owned?
So I remember people having those lovely, colourful Macs in the late 90s, early 2000s. Never really used one, was always PC, because that's how I was raised. When I grew up, we always had personal computers. We also always had desktop computers. We always pulled them apart and built them and wired them all together and things like that. And I never really got exposed to Apple products at all. But when I started my business back in 2006, I started using laptops because I didn't have an office and I was always working from different places. I would go to the pub and work, or I'd go to a cafe and sit and do work, or go to a client's house and have a meeting and take it with me. And I had solid state hard drives because I knew that I needed to make sure that the drives didn't fail. And I knew that normal laptops with normal drives would have a lot more problems. But even though I had solid state hard drives, every single laptop I bought failed, no matter how much I spent on it. Something would go wrong with it. And at one stage, I went through 6 laptops that had hard drive and hardware issues in 6 months. And I'm like, I can't keep doing this. This is ridiculous. These things just aren't, they're just not good enough. And so I thought, you know what? No, I'm going to get a Mac. So the very first Mac I got was an iMac. I went and bought a 27-inch screen iMac, which I've still got today. My son uses it now. And that was my first foray into Mac. And I tried Boot Camp because I thought I needed to have everything on Windows still for the programs I was running, and then found out that Boot Camp does nothing but slow your beautiful Mac down. So I found programs to use that I could use on Mac, and realized that AutoCAD worked on Mac. Didn't realize that it did before that. And ever since then, so that would have been about 2010. So for the last 11 years, I've had Macs. So we've got 2 iMacs. We've got 2 MacBooks in this house, one MacBook Air and one MacBook Pro. My son's got an iPhone. My wife's got an iPhone. I had 2 iPhones. I don't have one anymore, but I'm sure you'll ask me about that soon.
We're going to get to it.
Everything in this house is, except for my phone, is Apple product, is either MacBooks or iMacs or iPhones or iPads. And in fact, I can probably say this now because by the time this airs, it will have been my daughter's birthday. She's very creative like me, very artistic, loves drawing and sketching. And so for her birthday, she's getting an iPad with an Apple Pen so that she can use a program called Procreate, and she can sketch and create and become a graphic designer because that's what she wants to be.
Oh, that's awesome.
So more Apple products coming into this house in the next 2 weeks.
Okay. That sounds great. So you mentioned AutoCAD. So you moved from a PC using AutoCAD to Mac using AutoCAD.
And it's so much better.
Tell me about AutoCAD for Mac.
The user interface, I feel like it's been so long since I saw AutoCAD on a PC, but it feels smoother. It feels less clunky. I don't know what it is. Something about Apple is that everything just feels like it's easy to use. I'm not a technical guy when it comes to programs and programming and things like that. And Apple just makes life so much easier from that point of view. It's so much easier to install, and everything just runs smoothly in the background. There's no clunkiness. Something about PCs I always felt was very clunky. And it was very hard to set the systems up and set things up. Whereas with the Mac, it's user friendly is what I would say. And I've had, what is it? So I've had two iMacs now. This is my second, and it is now 5 years old. Um, and it was this Mac in particular is the only time any Apple product I've had a problem. And even then, I took it back to the store and they replaced everything inside it
Nice.
and then gave it back to me. And then there was still an issue with it, so I took it back and then they replaced everything again at no cost. Like, so it's essentially now a 3-year-old computer in there. And that's the other thing about the reason I love Apple is because their customer service is just outstanding. Anytime I've ever had a software issue with one of my old phones, you take it down and they just fix it on the spot. And if they couldn't fix it, they swap it for a brand new one and say, here you go, here's a replacement because it's under warranty. You don't get that sort of service from other companies. When I used to have HP laptops and things like that, you would have to send it away for 2 weeks and wait for them to come back to you and say, oh, we can't fix that. And then you've lost 2 weeks of no computer because they wouldn't give you a replacement. Whereas Apple would go, give us 24 hours. We can't fix that. Here's a whole new one. Or give us 3 days and we'll replace the parts and hand it back to you. The service was just so much better. That's the other reason I really like Apple's. I'll never ever go away from Apple products when it comes to computers and tablets and things like that. I can't see myself ever using another computer.
Well, I noticed you've got some really great photos on your website, but you also have some nice renderings. I'm curious, what do you use to create those renderings?
Can I be honest here and say I don't do the renderings myself? What I do is I extrude them all in SketchUp. So I use SketchUp on my iMac and I get them all looking the way I want them to look. And then I send them out to a company that then just runs them through their rendering software. 3D modeling is not, or 3D rendering is not something that I have great skills in. It's an area that I need to learn and improve in. But I do all of the extrude. So I run all of my projects. I model them. So I build them in 2D in AutoCAD. I know it's a bit slow and clunky from that point of view, and then extrude them in SketchUp out into 3D to show the clients. And then when the project's ready to go to planning and I want to put it on the website, I send it out to a company that does the 3D renderings from my SketchUp model. So I don't push my Mac hard on the AutoCAD side of things. I push my Mac hard more on the astronomy side of things than anything. So I have some astrophotography programs, one called Astro Pixel Processor that I can load in 60 or 70 images taken in raw format on my phone into this program and let it run, and it stacks them all on top of each other to make the image clearer, crisper, deeper. And then I use Photoshop to process those images. And for the podcast, I've got Adobe Premiere and Adobe Audition that I use on the Mac. So anything that I do myself, whether it's astronomy, astrophotography, architecture, podcasting, live streaming, is all run off the Mac, off programs off the Mac. But my 3D renderings, as I said, I get them to the SketchUp point and then I apply my materials of what the materials I want on there, and then I send it out for somebody else to do because they'd be much quicker than I am, and therefore much more cost effective, time efficient. It's just not an area I have the skills in.
Well, and you're being more productive that way.
Yes. Yep.
I'm curious, what other applications or services do you use to manage how you practice, how you manage your business?
So program wise, I really only use 3 programs. So I use Word on Mac. I have Adobe. Obviously, got an Adobe Creative Cloud license for all of my programs that I use for Adobe, for PDF editing and things like that. But really, it's just a file management system in Finder. I have my projects set up under project numbers in ascending order, and then under that I have subfolders for CAD files, render files, the Word documents, PDFs, archives. So it's just a filing system as such. And it works. It's always worked really well. It's always been clean and quick and easy to find files that I'm working on that I need to work on. If someone emails me and says, I need a copy of this particular file from this particular date, I can quite easily find it through that filing system that I created. I never had it until I got the Mac, and then I just started working that way. Started setting everything up clean. And so that's pretty much all I use. So I use Word to do my quotes.
How about for time tracking or accounting?
I don't time track at all. No, not at all. People will probably find that really weird that I don't time track. But because it's just me, I don't necessarily need to time track. Um, I've been doing it so long now that I know how long a project's going to take me to do. So I've got 4 townhouses that I'm working on at the moment, doing construction drawings on. And I know I can smash out a set of high quality, detailed construction drawings on that. They're probably around about 25 A1 pages, that one will be. And I can get that done in a week and a half. So I know what my hourly rate would be for a week and for an hour's worth of work, and then I can just extrapolate that out for that project.
Okay.
And so most of it's in my head, which is not great from most people's practice point of view. But as I said, I don't have staff. I don't have a big practice. It's just me. And I guess after all of these years of doing what I do, I know what each project is worth to me and how much time it's going to take me. So I can go, okay, well, I know that 4-unit project is going to take me about a week and a half to document. So based on my rate, it's X amount of dollars. That's my fixed price. And then if they need anything changed from that, well, it's just a very hefty. When I say hefty, I mean it's 2.5 times my hourly rate for changes. And that forces them to never change anything. Sometimes they do, but yeah, it's just, I guess it's a matter of experience. That one is really, for me, it's experience. So like I said, I just know how long each type of project's going to take me. So I price a fixed price based on that. And it seems to be working really well, in particular in the last, as I said, since lockdown hit, since COVID hit, it really has worked extremely well to do it that way. Initially, it was a bit hard because, for the first 4 or 5 years, sometimes I would do a project a lot quicker and be great. Well, I've made a lot more money on that one. And some projects would drag right out and you would lose money on them. But as the years have gone, I've sort of refined that process, and I now have a pretty good understanding of depending upon the size of the project, how long it's going to take, what I'm going to need to do, and then I can go, okay, well, based on that, here's my rate. And yes, no, let's go. So no programs. I used to use a program online, Hubstaff, I think it was, something like that, and I didn't get a lot out of it. I found that I was forget. So that's the other thing. The way I work is saying, hey, having ADHD, I jump from one thing to another all the time. So trying to remember to stop and pause the timer on that one and start it on that one, and then go back to what I was trying to do, I will have forgotten what I was going to do. So I did try a lot of time tracking or time management stuff, but I found I was getting more confused and forgetting to even start the timer or stop the timer. So I've kind of I've done a lot of growing in the last 2 years to the point that I now just accept that that's how I work. So that's how my brain goes. That's how I work. So I just roll with that. I don't think I could work in a practice with anybody else because I would be very bad at time management from their point of view. They probably wouldn't be happy with how I do things, but it works for me. And yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about being an Android user and using an Android phone. Why an Android phone?
Because the last Apple phone I had was was it 8? I think it was. I think it was an 8. Not sure now. Oh no, it was an iPhone 7. There you go. And we go up to the astronomy site, and I would put the phone up to the eyepiece of the very big telescopes that we have up there, and I'd take photos of Jupiter and Saturn and the moon. And then one night I just thought, I wonder if I can take a photo of this nebula that we're looking at. So nebula is like a gaseous cloud in the Milky Way, where all stars are all born, basically. Um, and I kind of could just get it in the photo, and I'm like, my Apple phone doesn't allow me to take timed exposures, and none of the apps I could download would allow me to do it. I couldn't change ISO settings. I couldn't. So it was like having a digital SLR with no features, which was very frustrating because I wanted to take nighttime images of the Milky Way. I wanted to take photos of galaxies. I wanted to try and do that with a phone. And the Apple phones at that particular time didn't have them. And I think maybe some of the more recent ones do, but I couldn't afford them. So I couldn't afford the money to buy the probably the most recent Apple phones. So I'm like, okay, well, I need a new phone and I want one that will allow me to take timed exposures, and I want to buy it outright because I don't want to put it on a plan. And what choices have I got? And I can never say this word right, but the Huawei P30 Lite cost me about $300 outright. And then I think what's the most recent iPhone? So in Australia, it's about $1,400, $1,300. So it's a lot more expensive, and I don't have that sort of disposable cash to throw away on a phone. So I got this one, and it allows me to do timed exposures. So I can do 30-second exposures. I can change the ISO setting. I can take them in raw format, and then I can plug them into my iMac, and download them from my iMac onto my iMac, and then process them on my iMac. So I'm blending the two together. But I have I have a Flickr account where I put all my images, and I'm now taking stacked images of things like Carina Nebula or Orion Nebula with my phone, which I couldn't do with my old iPhone. And so the real reason that I went Android was so that I could do these time exposed shots. And because I couldn't afford the Apple version that could do it.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. Otherwise, I would absolutely still have an Apple phone because I love them.
Yeah.
I've never had a problem with any of my Apple phones, and it's literally because this thing was cheap and did what I wanted it to do. The only reason.
How is it integrating the rest of your life with that Android phone?
It doesn't, and it's painful. It's absolutely painful. People send me iMessages and I don't get them, or they'll send a group message to me, like a group text message. And when you send a group text message to Apple, you can just reply all to everybody and everybody gets it. I get the group message, and if I send it back to everyone, they get separate messages from me, and they're like, what do you want about? Because it doesn't relate to anything they've sent me. It doesn't send it back to the group. It sends it individually to each of these people. So what it's done is it's forced me to use Messenger a lot more because at least that works across the platforms. So I found that's a massive problem. We're also looking at getting what's the Apple, the music, the sound pod or whatever it is. I can't think of the name of it now.
Oh, the HomePod?
Kind of like the Google HomePod. They're going to get an Apple one. Yeah, we're getting one of those for Christmas. Everyone in the house could hook onto it except for me.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So it is frustrating from that point of view. So hopefully the cost of iPhones drops in Australia a bit, or maybe I might buy a second-hand one in a year's time and get back into iPhone. As long as I can do my exposures and get my app going on it, that's fine. I'll be happy with that, and then I'll be back on iPhone. So it's a temporary deviation from Apple products from a phone point of view, and only because being stuck at home, like I said, this is all caused from lockdown because we can't go anywhere. So I can take my telescope in the backyard and I can attach my phone to it, and it gets me away from the stresses of being locked down, not being able to. So at the moment, we're only allowed to go 15 kilometres from our house, which is better than the 10 kilometres it was a few days ago. But case numbers are pretty high here now. And restrictions are still on. We still can't see family, we still can't see friends.
Wow.
all that sort of stuff. None of the shops are open. I can't go out into the bush because I can't go more than 15 kilometers. So I can't go hiking. And this was my escape from the world. So going into the backyard to do astronomy with my phone was an escape. And the iPhone couldn't let me do what I wanted it to do. It's becoming a bit of a big thing in the world of astronomy, taking images of nebula and galaxies and star clusters and planets with phones and processing them as if you're using high grade astronomy equipment. So I know guys that have spent 20 or 30,000 Australian dollars on astronomy equipment, and I have a $300 phone, a $10 phone holder, and a second hand telescope that cost us $1,000, and I'm doing stuff that's as good as what they're doing with that. And if I could do that with an Apple phone that it was cost effective enough for me, I would absolutely do it.
Well, hopefully you can pick up a iPhone 11 or 12. They're dropping the price on those as the newer phones come out, and they have a lot of capabilities. But I'm curious, is there a specific app that you're using to take these photos on the Huawei phone?
There is. It's called Deep Sky. It's called Deep Sky Camera, and I'm pretty sure it's not on. I'm pretty sure it's an Android only app at the moment. But the only reason I'm using that app is because the P30 Lite doesn't allow you to manually capture raw data. I can do ISO settings and timer settings with it, but it's all in JPEG format, which means they're only like 9 or 10 meg images, whereas the raw data files on this, 47 meg per photo, which is a lot more information, a lot more data. And the camera on this is I think it's a blue, yellow, green. So it's almost like an astrophotography camera in how its colors and pixels are set up.
Okay.
So that's the other thing. But yeah, look, the moment that I can get an iPhone that takes raw data images, I will be back with an iPhone. There's no doubt about that.
Well, I wanted to ask you one last question here or actually, I'm going to ask you two. The first one being, what advice would you give listeners if they're considering using a Mac to practice architecture?
See, I always wanted to learn Revit, but I can't because Revit's not on Mac. So that's one thing I would say. Be aware that there are some CAD programs that won't run on Mac. And if you're using Revit, you're going to have to boot camp. And I'm not, as I said earlier, I'm not a fan of boot camp. And I know they probably won't ever bring Revit onto Mac. I wish they would because I'd really love to use it. But there are other 3D CAD programs that will run on Mac. And the other one is make sure you get, if you're going to buy a Mac, the only thing that I regret with the one I bought at the moment is when I bought it, I probably should have got more memory put in it. So that's something I'm going to be doing in the next 2 to 3 months is tripling the memory in this. And then I'll have a Mac that'll last me another 5 or 6 years before I need to replace it. Because processing speed wise, it does perfectly fine with all of the programs. There's no lag in AutoCAD, no lag in SketchUp. The only time I have lag is in the astrophotography program because it uses a lot of CPU processing speed, a lot of power to do what it's got to do. So having some more memory will help that. But that's probably the two big ones. You can't use Revit, and just make sure you get a lot of memory on it. Don't do what I did and just go, oh, that'll do. 8 gig will do. I should have got 16 to start with, or maybe even 32, and that's what I'm going to in the next few months, upgrade it to about 32. And then I'll have a nice fast computer again. But even then, it's not slow. I mean, as I said, I host live streams for hours on end with this, and it doesn't have a problem. They're very sturdy computers.
Very reliable.
Very reliable. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you sharing your Apple and Mac experience and a little bit of Android experience as well with with that phone. But before we wrap this section of the show up, I want you to share with the audience one app or utility or service that you find most useful.
On my Mac?
Yeah.
Well, look, I love Adobe Cloud on my Mac. I really do. And I love being able to edit PDFs through Adobe Acrobat. And being able to process my images with Photoshop on the Mac. So Adobe Cloud would be a program, or I guess a service that really integrates well with the Mac, not just from my work point of view, but from my hobby point of view as well. So it's a beautiful program that integrates, I think, better on Mac than it does on PC, because of it's user friendly, and Macs are user friendly as well. So they just seem to integrate really well, and all of their programs, all of the Adobe Suite programs, run so smoothly on my computer. So that'd be one.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing. Well, now let's move on to our final segment, the 10 questions. And the first question is, what's your favorite word?
Well, my favorite word would be astrophotographhy. Um, a bit of a new word that some friends and I have coined because of the work that I do. They all have, as I said, they're all got the fancy astronomy equipment, and I'm doing stuff that's as good as them with my phone. So we termed the coin astrophotography. So it's flavor of the month at the moment, because it goes a long way to explaining what I do from a hobby point of view.
What's your least favorite word?
I don't really have one. Like I don't really have a least favorite word.
Okay.
Never thought about a word that I don't like.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Teaching, teaching people, sharing knowledge. I love whether it's architecture, whether it's astronomy, no matter what it is. I just love sharing knowledge with people and helping and guiding people. So in the world of architecture, that developer that I work with, he has a young building designer who's studying architecture, and so I'm training him. Well, not training him. I guess I'm guiding him, and assisting him in his growth, and I really enjoy that. A friend of mine who did the course with me, he's finished the course, but he was doing it full time pretty much. He he likes to run things past me as well. I enjoy mentoring him and helping him on his journey in the world of architecture, astronomy side of things with my son. And that's what I love about doing these events that I do, is just sharing what I get to see through telescopes with other people who may not have telescopes. And the fact that when we do these live streams, we are live stacking images of galaxies and nebula live on screen from telescopes pointed at the sky, and discussing them and teaching people about them. People have never looked through a telescope before, all of a sudden seeing a galaxy appear on their computer screen or their YouTube TV. I just love sharing and exploring. Love to explore, which is why I love hiking. And anytime I go somewhere, even if I've been there before, I will go a different way so I can find new places I've never been before and see new things. So, and all of that feeds back into the work that I do with my architecture. It all gives me inspiration for new ideas or new ways of doing things. And if I ever get stuck on something, it reminds me to sort of take a step back on a project and go, okay, like I do when I go hiking or go for a drive in a bush, maybe I should look at it from a different angle, or go and attack it from a different path that I haven't looked at before. And then usually I find a solution.
So, what turns you off?
Closed-minded people, people not willing to push their boundaries, because you don't grow as I don't think you grow as a person if you're not willing to push your own limits, if you're not willing to step outside of your comfort zone. So there's a YouTube channel that I watch quite a lot with the family. It's called Seek Discomfort. They're American guys. Actually, one's Canadian, one's French, and one's American, and one's Egyptian. But they all lived in America, all live in America, and they got this show called Seek Discomfort. And the whole idea of what they do is push themselves and others outside of their comfort zones so that they can learn and grow as people. And you know, the whole what if. Now I had people say to me when I said, "Oh, I'm going to do a podcast," they're like, "Oh, why would you do that? Like, it's not going to go anywhere. And I'm like, but what if it does? What if it does? You know, what if the work I'm doing with this developer turns into me doing something I've never done before? And it did. I've started working on aged care facilities, which I've never worked on before. And now all of a sudden I am. And it's a really interesting part of field in architecture to work in. So yeah, I just like I don't like people who aren't, not that I don't like them, I just don't like the idea of not pushing my own boundaries or people pushing their boundaries. Because you can learn so much and you can grow so quickly.
What sound or noise do you love?
I love the sound of a needle dropping on a record. I have a very extensive record collection, and some days I will listen to 8 hours worth of vinyl while I'm working. And I just love the sound of that needle hitting it and that little clunky sound that you get. It's a very tactile sound. My own brother says to me, I don't know why you could just get iTunes or Spotify. And I'm like, yeah, but then I'm not, you don't get that tactile of putting the record on and turning the record over. But I really love that sound.
What sound or noise do you hate?
The birds in the morning chirping. I know it's an odd one, but there's birds that live in the nest out in our backyard, and at 6 o'clock in the morning, they are noisy and disruptive, and it's a horrible sound. It's a horrible, horrible sound. That's fine when I'm out hiking and I can hear the birds chirping. That's fine. But at 6 o'clock in the morning, when I'm just waking up, it's a noise that I really don't want to hear over and over and over again.
What's your favorite curse word?
Well, I'm Australian, so Aussies love their use of slang, and I don't think I could use the curse word that Aussies use.
You can use it and I'll bleep it out.
All right. So in Australia, if someone's not your friend, you'll often call them, if you're having an argument with someone, you go, oi, mate, hey, mate. And that's like more often than not, that'll be you sort of getting your back up and saying, I don't like what you're doing. Whereas, it's a bit of an Aussie colloquialism, I guess, is that if you then turn around to someone and say, "Oh, you can't get me a beer," that's actually a term of endearment in Australia. And I know it sounds like it's a really horrible word, but over here, like you'll call your closest mates that word. Like you actually will, and most people won't take offense to it because it's just an Aussie thing. We're a bit weird. We're a bit weird. You guys have flip flops. We have thongs. Thongs aren't something that you wear as underwear. They're things you wear on your feet. Things like that.
Well, when I grew up, they were called thongs as well. The things you put on your feet, that is.
Yes, yeah. But and every time I say thongs to people in America, most of them go, "Oh, you mean flip flops?" I'm like, no, they're thongs.
Well, when we're talking, it's you can say thongs. It works.
Yeah. So that word was. I say it's a favorite curse word. I don't really have a favorite curse word, but that's one that makes me smile a lot because it's just such an Aussie thing. Yeah.
So, what profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Well, I'm attempting it now. I actually am attempting it. And that's part of that seeking discomfort, pushing myself out of the boundaries, hosting live streams and hosting events and doing event management, coming up with those sort of ideas and running a podcast, those sort of things. I guess not so much media, but I don't know what you would term the online media, I guess. Pushing myself into that world of online media. And it's something I'm attempting now. And as I said, it's come about because I've got so much downtime at the moment being in lockdown. So it's given me an opportunity to pursue those activities, and it's enjoyable and it's actually working.
What profession would you not like to do?
I would not like to be a doctor. I have a client who is a doctor and he doesn't want to be a doctor anymore. It's not a fun profession to be into based on the hours of work that he has to do and how it impacts him and how it makes him feel. I would not want to have that job. I have a huge amount of respect for doctors, but it is a job that I would never want to do.
If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
What would I like? I'd just like him to. He doesn't have to say anything really. Just thumbs up and hand me a beer. Yeah, and say, here you go. Have a can of beer.
That's an excellent answer.
He doesn't have to say anything.
Mark, I'd like to thank you for joining me on this episode of Inside the Apple Studio. Please let the listeners know where they can find you online and the best way to contact you to learn more about what you do.
Well, if they want to know about architecture and what I'm doing in my work, it's maddenbuildinggroup.com.au. If they're interested in my podcasting, it's spaghettification.com.au.
Well, there'll be links to both of those in the show notes if you're looking for them, especially on the oh, I can't even say it.
Spaghettification.
There it is. Spaghettification. Thank you again, Mark, for joining me.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Inside the Apple Studio. I'd like to thank Monograph for their support. You can also support the show by telling a friend and show them how to follow it in their favorite podcast player. If you have comments on the show, you can find me on Twitter at NPANN or at Apple for Arc. That's Apple, FORARCH. You can also comment on the Apple for Architects Facebook page and join the Apple for Architects Facebook group. Inside the Apple Studio is a production of Apple for Architects at appleforarchitects.com.